I'd like to start with a pertinent joke. I'm telling you it's a joke because with all the things going on in the world today, I didn't want you to think I was announcing the news or something. The Pope, Billy Graham, and Oral Roberts were in a three-way plane crash over the Pacific Ocean. They all died and they went to heaven together. "Oh, this is terrible," exclaimed St. Peter when they arrived at the pearly gates. "I know you guys think we summoned you here, but we weren't expecting you, and your quarters just aren't ready yet. We can't take you in right now, but we can't send you back either." Then he got an idea. He picked up his phone. "Lucifer, this is Pete here. Hey, I got these three guys up here, They're ours, but we weren't expecting them, and we got to fix the place up for them. And I'm kind of hoping that you can put them up for a few days, maybe just a couple of days. What do you say?" Reluctantly, the devil accepted. However, 2 days later, St. Peter got a call from Lucifer. He was a very worried devil. "Hey, Pete, Lou here. You got to come get these three clowns. This Pope fella is forgiving everybody. The Graham guy is saving everybody. And that Oral Roberts has raised enough money to buy air conditioning down here." My point is that even the devil is worrying these days. I'd like to continue with the Lenten theme for unity of release and renew. Release things like worry, fear, despair, guilt, and negativity of all kinds, and renew positive, hopeful thoughts like love, hope, faith, peace. It's not easy to give up negative emotions, even for the devil, apparently, especially in these times of COVID, crime, the Ukraine, the economy, hurricanes, and now tornadoes. Plenty of fuel for the fire out there. But we need to keep reminding ourselves constantly the basic unity principle that it's never what's going on out there that is the issue. It's always what's going on in us and how we see these situations. You have the power to release any thoughts, feelings, or behaviors that you have been holding onto that are holding you back from your spiritual maturity. You have the power to renew your mind and your life. It may take some practice at first, okay, but you can do it. Practice is necessary for any athlete. And as we talked about last week, you all are spiritual athletes. Of course it'll take some practice. That's okay. There is a lot happening out there in the world. Some of you have been shaken to the core. But remember to put it in its spiritual perspective. There have always been and there will always be plenty of outward situations that we can worry about. In fact, until the world accepts love and compassion and the understanding of the unity of all life, there will always be problems. If you are worried or fearful, many people won't blame you one bit. The outside world totally supports fear, stress, anger, guilt, worry, etc. However, you are not just many people. You know that negative feelings are never going to do you any good. In fact, they usually make things a lot worse because they paralyze your reactive centers. Neuroscience, the latest brain science research, talks a lot about that. For example, when students are criticized or scared or embarrassed or given pop quizzes, imagine, huh? Their whole brain-heart system shuts down and they can't even recall the information that they know. This is all the latest brain research. So release, release, release these paralyzing emotions and thoughts, which are doing you no good and are probably doing a lot of harm. Then you'll be able to see things differently. Then you'll begin to see how you can even grow from challenging situations. I know we all know that in Course of Miracles. You will begin to glean answers and wisdom, like fully realizing that it is never what happens out there that matters. It's always how we think about it. Like Shakespeare said in his play Hamlet, there's nothing good or bad, but thinking makes it so. And don't despair if your prayers don't seem to be answered. I read recently, it may seem that God doesn't answer our prayers when the real issue is that we don't like God's answers. There may be a huge learning opportunity that we are missing because we are afraid or mad or worried. During those times when problems seem truly overwhelming, which they do for all of us, first of all, just get very quiet. Take a few deep breaths. Connect with your source, like we talked about last week. Pray. Take a walk. Meditate. Take time out of your busy day to fill your spiritual tank with high-octane fuel. Release and renew. Release and renew. Remind yourself that you and God are one. There's only one power and presence in the universe. You don't have to carry your burdens alone. Let go of the thought that you are alone. Release it. The thought that you are alone is part of the clutter that you need to release for Lent. You are not alone. Along with such things as worry, doubt, fear, despair, and guilt. You have absolutely no need of them, and they do absolutely no good. As it says in Psalms 55, cast your burden on the Lord, and he will sustain you. Turn your worries, despair, guilt, etc. over to God completely. There's a Hindu god named Kali. She looks like a hairy, awful, ugly tarantula with bloodshot eyes. She's holding in her hand, I think I've told you about Kali before, a head that she has just cut off someone, and the blood is just dripping down. Good Hindus bequeath to Kali all their negativity, one thing at a time. Anger, vengefulness, unforgiveness, worry, doubt, fear, guilt, all kinds of negativity. One by one, they feed them all to Kali, this horrible tarantula-like goddess. Then, when the last negative feeling or thought is surrendered to Kali, she turns into a beautiful golden goddess. Let go and let God. Give all your negative emotions over. And then when you silently release all this worry, fear, guilt, and despair, start renewing. Renew love, wisdom, hope, forgiveness, joy, faith, positive outlook. You've made room for them. So let's again take this Lenten idea of release and renew out of the intellectual realm and into the experiential realm. Look at the sheet that was passed out with your hymnal. You've got a sheet, and it's from the Unity Lenten 2022 magazine entitled Release and Renew. Let's say the first line together about what to release. And then I'm going to say the second line by myself, what to renew. But let's all start with the first line. You all are going to say every first line. Let's start together. I release problems that seem overwhelming. I renew my awareness of my spiritual nature. I release a habit of judging others. I renew my commitment to see the divine in all beings. I release doubt, confusion, and indecision. I renew my divine power of wisdom. I release my fear of moving forward. I renew my willingness to step out in faith. I release pessimism and negative thinking. I renew my positive expectations. I release my habit of worrying. I renew my faith in divine order. I release discontent and criticism. I renew my gratitude in all things. I release any apathy or boredom. I renew my zeal and enthusiasm. I release any belief in limitation. I renew my sense of possibility. I release the fear of not having enough. I renew my awareness of abundance in my life. I release any drama or conflict. I renew my inner peace and spirit. I release any sense of discouragement. I renew my hope with the power of affirmative prayer. I release the habit of digging in my heels. I renew my practice of non-resistance. I release thoughts of fears of illness. I renew my openness to the healing power of spirit. I release fears of being alone. I renew my connection with spirit, self, and others. I release old grudges and resentments. I renew inner peace by forgiving. I release any need to complain. I renew my outlook through appreciation. I release anger and blame. I renew my patience and compassion. I release my darkest fears. I renew the strength and courage of my heart. I release the shadows of grief and sorrow. I renew myself in the serenity of silence. Yes, Lent is a time to release and renew. We all have an idea about the way things should be in the world and in our own lives. But the fact is, things have never been and never will be what we consider to be perfect. There have always been wars and pandemics and personal disappointments. Remember, in the Middle Ages, regularly a third to a half of Europe was decimated by the plague. The world lost 60 million people, God's children, 60 million of God's children in World War II alone. 30,000 children a day die of starvation in our world. And our personal lives have never been and never will be ideal. Jesus and many of the prophets also faced disappointments about the state of the world and mankind's consciousness. But the fact is that as truth students, we must remind ourselves that we can choose to see anything that happens as something to be worried about and defeated about, or we can see things maybe as a sign of what we can correct in the world and in our world. We can see these things as a symbol of something that we can heal in our world and in ourselves. We can use them to grow as individuals. We can use them to grow as a nation. Ideally, if we see a real problem, we work on correcting it. We bypass all the negative feelings about the issue. We can also try to identify that problem in ourselves and heal it. Most problems out there or in us should remind us of a simple lack of love. Getting defeated, stressed, or worried about it, it just keeps us paralyzed so that we can't do anything about it. For example, the war in Ukraine. We can worry or we can find ways to help the victims and ultimately find ways to avoid these conflicts in the future. Maybe we can give to the Red Cross. Maybe we can help the victims in another way. We can write letters to our congressman. We can also let it be a lesson in love. And what the results are when people don't develop love in their hearts for everyone. If we can't yet find love in our hearts for certain people, we can at least call on our wisdom. For example, many historians believe that World War II was caused because the Allies were so bitter after World War I that in the Treaty of Versailles, they penalized the Germans so much economically and geographically that the rising Nazis felt like it was their duty to fight. They had to fight, they thought. And voila, we had World War II. But we learned our lesson, and after World War II, we instituted the Marshall Plan to help Germany and Japan reconstruct so they wouldn't be just beaten down and want to rise against everyone again. The result was that we gained 2 allies by using our wisdom, Germany and Japan. It was expensive for us. Sure, there are a lot of people politically that were against it, but it was far cheaper than a third world war. Far cheaper than losing 60 million plus more people. In other words, we used our wisdom. Probably there was not a lot of love involved because it was right after the war, but we used wisdom. That's doing something about what we formerly were just worried and fretted about. Maybe we can even use the outer situation to identify a little bit of us, a little part of us that is like those whom we hate, and then release that part of us. In every situation, no matter how bad it seems, there is always the possibility to grow and to learn. There's never a need to feel defeated. Worry doesn't change anything except our good health. The energy and time we spend worrying and we've spent being fearful would be far better spent doing something about the outer situation or our inner issue that caused the negative reaction in the first place. There's always some gain in anything if we just look at things differently, as Susan DeMara always tells us in Course of Miracles. Just look at it differently. If you're feeling a personal defeat, the same truth holds. Everything you feel worried about or fearful about can be a lesson, another lesson in what doesn't work. Think of Steve Jobs. He failed many, many times before he invented what he did and became the head of Apple. And then he even got fired from Apple, his own company. I think he was out of work for some 4 years or something. But he learned from his mistakes, and he returned and triumphed even more. What if he had succumbed to defeat and worry and disappointment? Oh, I invented all this, I did it all, and now look where I am, and just gave up. Unity and the Course of Miracles tell us that we can always choose how we experience life, how we experience anything. It isn't what happens to us, it's how we see and react to what happens to us. Basic unity principle. The situation is never the cause of our worries. We are. It's our thinking about the issues, world problems and personal issues. And Lent is a great time to start being aware of that negative thinking and let it go. You don't deserve to have to bear it, for one thing, and you don't need to. Let it go. Just remember, the issue may be external, but the reaction to it is always internal. The situation may have happened, sure, don't be Pollyanna about it, but your experience of it is totally inside. It's what is happening in our minds that create our whole reality. So, any challenge can make possible the great breakthrough. The disadvantage can become the advantage, the great opportunity. I was listening to a Eric Butterworth tape this week, and he was talking about the poor oyster who gets that grain of sand in its shell, and it's irritating, and he tries to get it out, and he can't. But in the end, he turns that piece of that grain of sand into a beautiful, translucent jewel of a pearl. We will always have irritating grains of sand in our lives, but we can always use the irritation to produce a pearl. Discouragement, worry, guilt, and despair are setbacks that should remind us that our light has been turned off. We need to reconnect to our source, like we talked about last week. The important thing is for us to realize when we get discouraged and worried about outside issues, remember, you have been looking outside of yourself to determine your reality. God is inside of you. We must seek spiritual understanding. We must see things from a higher point of ourselves. We can find good, we can find advantage and learning opportunities in absolutely everything. And we can help change some of those outer issues better when we stay positive and we aren't dragged down by all this negativity. Discouragement and worry come from the neglect of our spiritual life. If we keep connected to our source, God, we will more quickly realize the good that can be in any situation, in every setback. It's entirely how we deal with it in our consciousness. There are always blessings and opportunities in seeming failure and setbacks. Just remember that. Sometimes it's hard to see it, but know that. We worry or feel discouraged because that's how we have chosen to deal with the situation. And we have always had the option to renew our point of view. Instead of thinking of all kinds of negative consequences, formulate in your mind an image of what you would like to see happen. COVID ends, a peaceful outcome happens in the Ukraine, or our economy improves, you get a better job than the one you lost. Worry, defeat, and helplessness is thinking about the facts of life from the lowest possible point of view. Prayer and contemplation of those facts is from the highest point of view. Prayer is seeing everything with that light turned on, connected to the source. Worry and discouragement is seeing with the lights turned off. So turn on your light by connecting to your source and give up for Lent. Release things, all those things, worry, fear, defeat, guilt. You could fill in the blank. No experience has any meaning or identity within itself. Just keep reminding yourself it's all the way you see it. Bottom line, give up for Lent everything that doesn't serve your highest self, your hopes, and your dreams. Release worry, disillusionment, discouragement, limitation, fear, resentment, guilt, anger, blame. None of these things are attributes of God, and none of them are necessary for anything, and they are counterproductive for everything. Instead, like it says, renew, and renew your positive outlook. Hope, faith, love, forgiveness, peace, wisdom, optimism. Look at what is going on out there and look then at your reactions to them. Imagine how you could see them differently. Visualize the best possible outcome. Pray. Learn from every situation and let go of the negative parts of you that you have outgrown. Let them go. Let that negativity and guilt be a little nudge to help you see what needs to be healed and given up for Lent. You have the inner power to do that, and you deserve to be free of everything that keeps you from living a life of peace and joy and love and abundance. Release and renew. That's the 2022 Unity theme for Lent. Let it be yours too. I'll close with this story. A man named Joe finds himself in dire trouble. His business has gone bust and he's in serious financial crisis. He's so desperate that he asks God to help him. He begins to pray, God, please help me. I've lost my business, and if I don't get some money, I'm going to lose my house as well. Please let me win the lottery. Lottery nights come, and they go, and somebody else always wins. Joe again prays, God, please let me win the lotto. I've lost my business, now I've lost my house, I'm going to lose my car as well. Lottery night comes and Joe still has no luck. Once again he prays, my God, why have you forsaken me? I've lost my business, my house, and now my car, my wife and my children are starving. I don't often ask you for help, and I have always been a good servant to you. Please let me win the lotto just this one time so that I can get my life back in order. Suddenly there's this blinding flash of light as the heavens open up, and Joe is confronted by this voice of God himself. Joe, meet me halfway on this. Buy a ticket. We can't just sit back and wait for God to do everything. We must do our part. We must reconnect, release, and renew. You deserve nothing less than the life that will provide you.